Welcome everybody to Credo at Unitarian Universalist Community of Charlotte. I'm Barbara DeVitti. I'm coordinating the Credos this year. This is my shared ministry as a volunteer, and I want to acknowledge our Zoom master back there, Paul Turner, and backup is Cindy Martinek. So thank you. And I'm pleased to introduce today Greg Schropp. He's been a member along with his wife Melissa for 24 years now, and he's done just about everything, including serving on the board. He serves in the nursery and on the CYRE team, the congregational care team. He's currently the AV coordinator for Sunday services, and he and Alicia just got out of the cell booth upstairs. And he's part of the 75th anniversary planning group. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this today. Share us about what you give your heart to. Greg Schropp.
And coordinated AV. I just take the sound, scare the video. So some of this is going to repeat what is. For those who don't know me, my name is Greg Schropp, and I've been a member of UUCC for about 23 years now. I'm married to Melissa Schropp, who's now serving as one of the current CYRE coordinators. And we have 3 children who've gone through the UUCC CYRE program. Oldest one's Will, just about to graduate from American College of Business Arts in Charleston next month. Yay! Phoebe, our middle child, she's just about to complete her first year at UNC Asheville. And Nora, our youngest, is about to graduate high school from CMS's Magnet School, Northwest School of Arts, and she is committed to App State. Go Mountaineers, it's fun. There she is. All right, now I can't talk ill about her. So you all, most of you I don't think know this, but this is not my first Credo, but it is my first Credo in this setting. I did my first Credo as part of the Common Apes program here at UUCC when I was a mentor. And all the mentors at that time were asked to write their Credos, which I think was the first time the mentors were asked to do that by Kathleen. And at that time, we shared our Credos with the other mentors. So in preparing for today, I looked back into my files and I found it so I could read over it and see what's changed and go ahead and update it. Well, after searching, which took a little bit doing, I found out, and I cannot believe this, surprisingly, it was written in 2012. Yes, this is 13 years ago. It's funny, I was reading through the script and it started out as, in almost my half century of life. Like, wow. Well, that verbiage has to be updated now to almost 6 decades of life. Crazy how time flies. So, as I assume is true with many of you, my view of the world and religion, etc., has changed along the way. When I was young, along with my 2 siblings, I have an older sister and a younger brother, we were raised in the Roman Catholic faith, as were both of my parents. I attended 12 years of private Catholic schools, including 4 years in an all-boy high school, which ironically, just this last fall, I went to my 40th, yes, my 40th high school reunion. Again, these chunks of time is hard to comprehend. So even after being an altar boy, now correctly called an altar server for a number of years during that time while I was in elementary school. But as I entered high school, I noticed small changes starting in my belief systems, such as during the profession of faith that's recited weekly during a Roman Catholic mass, I stopped reciting certain sentences of the Apostle Creeds, because I didn't believe them anymore. But yet, this wasn't something that made me interested in changing my faith. In fact, I continued to go to weekly mass most Sundays, all through college and after. But now that I reflect on that point in my life, I did not search elsewhere, not because I necessarily got anything out of weekly mass and the Roman Catholic faith, but mostly out of an in bold type habit, as that is what I knew. It's what I grew up with, just the ritual we did every week. So as life moved on, I met my wife, Melissa, and while doing the long distance dating thing one weekend, while I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, I went to a Saturday mass. And the whole sermon was the priest's dissatisfaction about the clothing worn to that particular service. I just thought, well, that's a waste of time. So I bent it to Melissa, and the next time I was up visiting her in Rochester, New York, she saw an opening. In one weekend, while there, that weekend, she suggested, hey, let's go to a Unitarian Universalist service at a congregation in the area. And she found the location of that thing, of this congregation, in a thing called, or at all you older people I know, the Yellow Pages. Daughter, you never seen it. So, anyways, after we walked out of this first Unitarian Universalist service, I commented to Melissa, I thought we had just been to a political rally. Anyway, a little while later, we decided to get married. And so since Melissa was raised in a different faith tradition, Presbyterian, and me Catholic, we intended at the time to have an interfaith wedding. But we found out to have a Catholic priest preside at our ceremony, we had a promise in writing to raise our children Catholic. Since at that point, we didn't even know where we were to have our wedding reception. So to make a promise for something that far off in the future, we couldn't do in good conscience. Nor for that matter, was Melissa ever going to agree to that. So that moment started me on my journey to a different religious or spiritual path. So after we got married, my wife and I decided to visit and then join the Unitarian Universalist Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We were there for a few years, and later we moved down here to Charlotte. And initially we dated the UUCC for a while. Then we committed and joined shortly after our first child was born. That'd be Will, that I mentioned, is graduating soon. But this short bio doesn't verbalize well my credo. As I reflected on this credo presentation, I thought more on the reference that was alluded to earlier that Jay had made when we were preparing for our credos for the coming of age by Karen Armstrong in the original meaning of the word credo. That is, what do I give my heart to? Besides my family, I really believe I give my heart to my fellow human, especially those who are less fortunate, and the earth. That is environmental causes. And how appropriate is that as we just had Earth Day yesterday? And the kids were doing Earth projects today in their CYRE classes. So when I look at where I spend my time and my money, I see myself participating in activities in the past here, such as sandwich making, rooms in the inn, way earlier, MAP meals, Habitat for Humanity, mentoring at distressed elementary schools, etc. So I have to say I am less interested in doctrine, but more interested in practice, especially in the socialized justice realm. And that practice is sort of was alluded to in the service today. So Karen Armstrong mentioned that, quote unquote, being faithful means practicing this and living it every moment of every day. To me, this is where my environmental side lives, is I'm constantly thinking about how to minimize my negative impact on the earth by simple, little everyday actions, such as taking short, less frequent showers. I'm so crazy I even collect the cold water while the shower is warming up to use to flush the toilet plate. Picking up someone else's trash that can be recycled. In fact, at work, I'm called the can man at work. Minimizing my automobile trips. Funny story about that. I like to combine my trips when I'm running errands. So when Will was young, he would say every time I got in the car, I'd say, ugh, before I started the car. It's usually I forgot something that was going to be part of this multiple errand runs, like say grabbing the library book to return. So I had to laugh. So because of that, then I started putting my keys to whatever I needed to take with me. Then guess what happens? Then I can't find my keys. So, anyways, on a larger level, this is the area where I advocate for changes to laws that I think are good for the environment and therefore all men and women. I do this through contact with our legislators and our political system, where I advocate for positive changes. So I have to agree with Karen Armstrong that understanding religion does not come first for me, but as she stated, practice comes first. And one practices all the time, understanding of the transcendent inevitably comes. We are changed by practice, not by reciting words. Though I no longer believe in many of the words of the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed for my former Catholic Christian faith, I do believe in the so-called Great Commandment of Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself, or otherwise known as the Golden Rule. And in our case, the Unitarian Universalist first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So basically, at this point in my life, I really probably consider myself an agnostic, borderline atheist. I don't feel it's really important at all to me to know if there is some all-powerful being after or afterlife. In my opinion, no one has the answers or ever going to have those answers. So that's about it. I'm open to any questions.
Let's alternate with a question from the room and a question from the Zoom. Okay, let's start in the room here. Anybody? No questions?
Greg,
What, um, what years were you attending the Harrisburg UU? I grew up near there, and how do you find that UU congregation different from ours?
Let's see, we moved there right after a year, right after we got married, so 93 to 95. It was a long time ago. It's our first foray into it, a lot smaller congregation.
That's Stan Sears and minister.
Stand up with a shooter. And for us, the one good thing is, you know, we were just married, we met another couple there and started doing stuff with them. So that was sort of helpful.
Paul, do we have a question from the Zoom?
not yet. So,
Okay, Lee, you had your hand up.
yeah, Greg, so when you decided to leave Catholicism, how'd that go with your family?
Well, it's interesting, and some more background. My father was a career in the military, in the Air Force, but before that, all through his life, he was studying to be a priest. He was in seminary school, and he's one of 5 children. He has an older sister that became a nun. His mom was from an Irish background family, so I was told there was sort of this mentality at that time when you have a child that's a nun, another child that's a priest, you're guaranteed a spot in heaven. And so for my dad, just a side story, when he decided to get off the path of being a priest, he was super worried about telling his mom. He thought he was just going to disappoint her. And like he was preparing for the next stage of seminary, like he had the summer off. And I remember he told me he was asking his dad, or his dad was asking him, "Is like, don't you need to start getting ready to go back to seminary?" Like, "Oh, I'm not going back." And surprisingly to him, he disappointed his father, who was of a German descent, more than his mom, and he was worried about disappointing his mom. So, anyways, sort of ties into it. So I think when I went on my own path, he was okay with that because he sort of, roundabout way did something similar. My mom didn't really talk about it. I think it bothered her a lot more than it bothered my dad. But my mom passed away much earlier, so we were barely starting the UUC thing when she passed away.
Jared.
Yeah, Greg, you mentioned very, very briefly mentorship, maybe one word or so, but what I want to do is honor you because in the years I've been a part of this church, you have been mentor and a part of the youth in this program, and I really want to honor you for that.
Thank you.
In your name in many roles here.
Since you quit the softball league, you missed the beers at the dugout Dorian after the game.
I still make up for that.
Down here on the floor, Rich Green.
What's your secret for raising such wonderful children?
My wife. It's all despite of me.
Yes.
What do you see in your future?
One happy.
Man, that's a good question. He's better.
Murky.
Huh? I don't even know how to answer it. Be healthy.
World travel.
And hopefully wherever you go, whatever you do, you'll take your smile and your good humor. Yes.
Well, I remember, I know Greg, not Doug, through different paths, and he's worked with a friend of mine, and he's had a very challenging time raising two challenged adopted kids that were the same age as my sons, but I know you've been a big light in his life, and that's just, I think that's seeing all the stuff you do here and everything you do, it's a real honor to have you here. Thank you.
Joe.
I'm aware that you've been working with the youth, but I'd like to know more about what you think this church does for the youth and how that's been demonstrated. Now, youth have come into this church and been different than they perhaps would have turned out. Have you noticed that?
Well, I mentioned in my talk about being raised Roman Catholic and not thinking about it, just more a habit. And I think one of the things that happens here is we have the program for the youth, CYRE, children, youth, religious education. And to me, compared to me growing up Roman Catholic and through Roman Catholic schools, I consider that part being indoctrinated and not educated. And here, I think the youth has the opportunity to get educated. Like I believe this year, they've done stuff that our kids went through. They go to visit all
They
different
went to
faiths,
a Catholic church.
temples,
Yeah.
Catholic churches, Buddhist thing. So to me, that's just so wonderful compared to the way I was raised. I think it's a real exposure, you know, so we argue that's why some don't stay, but you know, you get to experience all this other stuff, you can make your own decision. That's true education. I always think of people in certain religions, like this is the religion for me. I'm like, you know, they live in a certain part of the world, that's all they know. You know, and we don't maybe know that other part of the world. So to broaden your experiences, I think the youth get that here. So.
So one of the things that really caught my attention about your involvement here is volunteering in the nursery with young children. You want to tell us how that experience is for you, how long you've been doing it, what it does for you?
Well, it's
He
great.
likes to wear the Krispy Kreme hat.
Yeah. Or the birthday.
What are the ages that you?
Well, it's infants to 3. And a couple of my kids, including Nora and an older one, Will, had worked in the nursery with me. And it's interesting you mentioned that because I've been at it a while and Will was home on one of the breaks and I said, can you believe so-and-so's like in middle school now? And, you know, like, again, these huge blocks of time, you know, so I was like, God, I remember taking care of this one when they were in the bassinet, you know, sleeping as an infant. So it's neat to see them all the way through and it's just fun.
Would you encourage any other guys to volunteer? with?
Sure.
If you've ever seen Greg with a baby, he's amazing. You would want him as a father or grandfather. He's absolutely amazing. I've seen other guys, it's like, what is it? What do I do with that? Totally interacting with them. Really amazing with them.
Oh, we have a Zoom question?
Yes, Greg, we shared facility roles with small group ministry. How was that for you and why shouldn't we restart it?
Don't we still have small group ministry?
Well, why don't you share your experience with small group ministry?
Wow, that was so long ago. Well, one of the best things about it was a good way to meet people out of your circle here. You tend to keep going to the same people, so I like that. I think.
Well, what was it like? What did you do?
Thank you. Took a thing to go. That must have been like 15 years ago.
Involved drugs.
Was anybody else here involved with the shared ministry group? Hey, you want to, Carol, you want to share with us what you remember about that?
Well, and you were a facilitator, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it was
It's just,
early.
yeah, it's just a way to get to know other people and sometimes on a deeper level. You dealt with spiritual issues and personal things came up as well. And so here's a group of like 12 people and sort of like Sunday school and yet not. So we're still doing it. I think we have one group that's meeting right now.
Yeah, it morphed into discovery circles, so
Right.
we are still doing. it,
Yeah,
just
it's same
For
thing,
whatever.
just a different name.
Discovery circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say I did two. I did one like what Carol did, and I would think it'd be under the same umbrella as we had a small group ministry for families that we did on Friday night.
Okay, so
There's kind of the UUCC parent group.
Parent group, yeah.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to get involved in a discovery group now, who would they contact?
Is that you? Kelly.
Kelly Green.
Kelly.
Yeah.
Kelly Green, okay.
And let me put in I'm in a discovery group now, and they're different discovery circle. They're much different than they were a few years ago when I was in one. I like them even better. So I just encourage everybody.
You mean we're getting better?
We're getting better.
Any other questions?
I just like to congratulate you on even with forgetting stuff so much. You're not living in the past, you're not living in the future, you're living now. And what else is there? There is nothing else. Oh, you're doing a great job. You're expanding, you're meeting people, you're giving, working. Everything you're doing is great.
And all with a
I'll
smile.
work for you anytime.
Well, thank you all. I'm sure you'll be willing to stay and talk with people individually if they like. Thank you so much for coming. Next time, it will be Mary Bruce speaking with us. And she's one of our newer members, so we'd kind of like to get some balance of variety in our speakers. So come put that on your calendar for the 4th Friday. Sunday.
Come Friday, they will be here.
Thanks again.
Thank you.